Welcome to Commissioner's Corner. I'm Najya Mawasi. Let's think about something. Boston. Our city is growing. Cranes are in the air, new buildings are going up every day, and big companies are moving here. This is a dynamic time in Boston's history. Chris Osgood, Chief of Streets, Transportation, and Sanitation, will share his vision with us on how Boston is changing. We'll talk about safety, transportation, reliability, and keeping our city clean. Chief Osgood, such a pleasure to have you with us today. There's so much happening in the city of Boston, as I mentioned. All of these buildings are going up, new infrastructure, the streets are changing. What is happening? You have this initiative, this comprehensive plan called Go Boston 2030. It's a vision to an action plan. Talk to us about it.
So we're very fortunate that over the last several years, we've been partnering with residents to actually build a long-term vision for the city streets. That's that plan you just mentioned, Go Boston 2030. It was really led by our Transportation Commissioner, Gina Fiandaca, and she and her team did a fantastic job of engaging thousands of residents to basically address some of the issues that you raised in the introduction. We know that Boston is growing. We need to make sure that our transportation infrastructure is actually helping us keep all of our neighborhoods livable and connecting all of us to the great job opportunities and cultural opportunities and educational opportunities in the city. We know that as we're growing, we want to become a more equitable city, that we want to do a better job of connecting those folks who have limited access to good transportation opportunities today to have better access to transportation opportunities in the future. And as I know that you've covered in some of your past Commissioner Corners, we have a big interest in the city of figuring out how do we actually reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and make sure that Boston is better prepared for the climate change that's ahead of us. So at the heart of Go Boston 2030 are efforts that really help us address those three challenges. How do we manage growth? How do we increase equity? How do we improve resiliency in the city of Boston? And what we heard from our residents very clearly was that they want us to focus on a set of really core initiatives, things that make our streets safer, particularly for folks who are walking and biking. Things that make our city more reliable to get around, particularly if you're driving a car or you're sitting on a bus. And things that make good transportation choices more accessible to more neighborhoods across the city, whether that's opportunities to bike or walk or take transit or to drive, that we need to figure out ways of bringing those great choices to more places across our city. So in Go Boston 2030, we have a plan that was really built by our residents to figure out how over the next 15 years we make the right investments to deliver on those opportunities of safety and accessibility and reliability.
You talked about participants, residents getting involved. I think that's very, very important because they actually live here and you know they're mobile and they have to commute. What were some of their concerns or suggestions?
Sure. So we did essentially 3 rounds of public engagement in this process. The first round was really almost a visioning effort with our residents. We literally went out on the streets. You can't plan the streets without being on the streets. So we went out there and we actually just started talking to residents and trying to understand what are the things that they really most want us to achieve in our city. How do they want our streets to feel in 2030? And it's out of those conversations with about 5,000 residents that those key themes of safety, reliability, and accessibility came to the top. After we did that sort of first round of engagement, the next round of engagement was going back to our constituents and saying, okay, you told us these are the big things you want us to accomplish. What are some of the specific projects and policies that can help us get there? So we went back out and we got about 3,000 specific ideas from residents about investments we could make or policies we could change or places we could build that would improve their transportation life in the streets in our city. And then the third round of engagement was after we sort of looked at those 3,000 specific policy and project ideas. We did some data analysis to figure out which ones would most move the needle on the things that residents cared most about. And we went back out to the public with a ballot and we said, okay, here's sort of a consolidated list of around 58 project and policy ideas that we can start in on. We want the public to tell us where we should start. And so we went and we got, again, sort of thousands of folks to vote on this ballot, which is really giving us direction as we think about how we build our budget, how we organize our time, and the way in which we want to drive our agenda forward.
That's excellent. It's really great to have people participate and engage in their city. You recently, the city recently implemented some slowing measures on the streets. Boston reduced its speeds to
25 miles an hour, default speed limit. So one of the things that we've heard in every single neighborhood is a big desire for us, both on busy corridors and on residential side streets, to calm speeds and to reduce crashes so that we can save lives and make our streets sort of more friendly places to live on or to
Was that a concern for residents?
Very much so. So I would say that of all of the key areas that residents flagged for us, that notion of making our streets safer for everybody on the streets, whether you're walking or biking or driving or taking transit, that the streets have an opportunity to be far safer for all of our road users. Tragically, in the city of Boston, we've had around 24 individuals walking, biking, or driving who have died each of the last 2 years. It is a huge priority for our mayor to figure out how do we actually reduce the number of serious injuries and fatalities on our streets. As part of that, the mayor actually had the city of Boston join what is called the Vision Zero initiative. This is an international effort to eliminate roadway fatalities from streets. And as part of that, we've done a whole set of things, some of which you touched on. So the mayor was able to work with our colleagues at the state legislature and with the city council to actually be able to lower Boston's default speed limit to 25 miles an hour. That means on a typical unposted street in the city of Boston, one should be driving 25 miles an hour. And the research behind that is actually really clear. If folks go at a slower speed, they are less likely to get into an accident. That accident is less likely to result in a severe injury or a fatality. Hand in hand with that, the mayor put money in the Boston Transportation Department's budget to make the sort of neighborhood investments that our residents are really looking for, and that's the Neighborhood Slow Streets program. Is one of those new funded efforts. That is really led by our Active Transportation Group, and what they have done is work with community organizations who have an interest in really addressing high amounts of cut-through traffic or high amounts of speeding on residential streets. So a few weeks ago, we were fortunate to cut the ribbon on our first neighborhood, Slow Street, which was in the Stony Brook neighborhood of Jamaica Plain, where we worked with the neighborhood and put in some changes essentially to signage and to road striping, and we put in speed humps, all of which already anecdotally are having a very positive impact.
I was just going to ask
It's been great. The feedback from our residents has been terrific. On the same day we cut the ribbon there, we actually broke ground on our next neighborhood Slow Street area, which is the Talbot-Norfolk Triangle in Dorchester. And we have 5 more neighborhood slow streets that we'll be planning over the course of the months ahead. And we will actually be going back out to the community this spring for other neighborhoods that want to be able to participate in this program.
And you also have a second phase, right?
Yes.
For Grove Street, some areas in Roxbury,
Exactly
Rosendale,
right.
and Dorchester.
Exactly. So those are the next 5 that we're focused on. And if anyone's interested, they can go to visionzeroboston.org and learn more about the Neighborhood Slow Streets program. And then for neighborhoods that are not currently part of our Neighborhood Slow Streets program, we know there is far greater demand right now than we've been able to meet so far, that they're able to apply to be sort of in our next round of sort of neighborhood organizations that can participate in this program.
So I actually saw that video of the ribbon cutting of the pilot that you did for the Stony Brook. Let's take a look at that.
Terrific.
All these efforts are to reduce speed in our neighborhoods and enhance safety for pedestrians and cyclists. I get a lot of the credit for reducing the speed limit, but actually the city council did it. It was a bill that they filed and they passed in this council, and we worked collectively to get that through the legislature up at the State House.
As much as today is really about the impact that we are trying to have on these blocks, it is really about a change across the city, a change that we're looking at on our streets everywhere, a change that's really being led by the mayor and led by the commissioner to figure out how we calm speeds, how we reduce crashes, how we save lives, how we make our streets work for everybody. So
let's stay on the theme about streets, because there's, you're doing some new artistry of the streets. Talk to us about that. Are they going to look a little different?
So one of the things that we also heard loud and clear in the public process is that while residents care deeply about using our streets to get from point A to point B, they also want our streets to be great places to be. And we feel very strongly that underlying all great cities really are these great streets, places where residents can actually come together, form community, sort of celebrate what makes Boston great. Actually, in the banner behind you, there's some terrific examples of exactly that, of folks who are using our streets to play music, for festivals. And we want to figure out more ways that we can actually make our streets easier for our residents to use for those sort of purposes.
What can we expect to see? Like, how is that going to be different from what we see today?
Yeah. So some of the things that we have already started in on, there's been a series of efforts that have been called open streets. So we've actually closed down Newbury Street both last year and a couple times this year to make it much more of a place that's simply for pedestrians or for cyclists to be able to enjoy, to be able to come together, to be able to enjoy sort of the retail experience there. We did something similar not far from where we're sitting over on Canal Street in the West End, where we simply shut down the street for an afternoon and allowed it to be a place where pedestrians could really enjoy the space. We've worked hand in hand with the terrific team at the Mayor's Arts and Culture Group, and really thinking about how we make our streets a better canvas for artists in our city. So this means everything from incorporating public art into a new project we're doing in North Square in the North End.
That's fascinating.
It's been awesome. And same thing at Hyde Square in Jamaica Plain.
See.
I would agree with you on that. There's a huge amount of interest, and we were able to support some resident organizations doing sort of basically street murals in Rosendale, in Alston. It's actually been community organizations who have been working with the Mayor's mural crew and Chief Julie Burrows' team, and they've done an amazing job of figuring out ways that we can make our streets sort of these beautiful canvases and create these community moments where folks can come together and actually sort of put a mural in a place that has great meaning to them. One of the things that is sort of on our plate for the year ahead is to figure out how do we actually make that easier for people to do, for folks who want to have a block party or do a street mural or bring more art to our streets.
That's exciting.
It's awesome. So that is a big part of what 2018 is going to be a focus on, and how we make our streets really a great public realm and not just a great sort of essential utilitarian part of Boston.
I think that's great because you walk around and visually, it gives you a whole different perspective, different feeling. So that's great. Yeah. Parking meters. We have some new parking meters. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're very focused on is how to sort of transform the parking experience in Boston. So we've done a number of things to try to make parking a little bit more convenient, a little bit better managed, and also in some places just simply less needed. So on the more convenient side, parking meters is a clear part of that. We've replaced every single old parking meter in the city that used to just take quarters with meters that take quarters and credit cards, which basically means that no longer do you have to hunt for quarters in your car.
I think that's great. I use my credit card more now. That's excellent.
I got to tell you, people have been very appreciative of that. And the companion piece to that is a mobile app that we launched called Park Boston. And that allows people to be able to pay with their smartphone. And if they didn't sort of pay the full amount when they first park, but want to be able to top up their parking meter because they're going to stay longer.
They can do it from their phone?
They can do it from their phone. It is fantastic. So people,
no way.
Exactly. I got to tell you, we've done a lot of different things on our streets.
That is awesome.
With
When is that? Is
so
that now?
It is live. It is on all the blocks in the city of Boston that have parking meters.
Okay.
So people have really enjoyed the Park Boston experience. So those are the sort of things we're trying to do to make parking more convenient. There's a set of things we're also trying to do to really think about how we actually make parking just
convenient.
Better managed. Convenient, yes. So on-street parking.
You're not worried about getting a ticket.
Yes, sorry, absolutely.
Money. We're already paying enough.
No, there are lots of things that we do, and I encourage folks who have an interest to check out boston.gov/performance-parking. There they will see a new initiative that we're doing in the South Boston waterfront and in the Back Bay to think about how we can adjust the pricing of parking meters to be able to ensure that there's actually more available parking meters for folks who are looking to go shop or go to a restaurant, less double parking, all sorts of benefits on our city streets.
Sure. Let's talk about mobility.
Sure.
Our transportation, MBTA, bikes. You have a new bike initiative.
Yes, we do.
I'm seeing a lot of bikes everywhere.
Yes.
How can we access them? How much is it? So on and so forth.
Sure. So there's a whole set of things that we're doing in our city, really around exactly what you're saying, walking, biking, transit, and for folks who are driving. Today, around 40% of the folks who live in Boston, commute to a job in the city, go by car. About 1 out of every 3 residents takes public transit.
Yes.
Around 14% of people in the city of Boston actually are able to walk to work, which is a higher percentage than any other major city in the United States. And about 2% of our residents hop on a bike and are able to bike to work. And that number is much higher, particularly in places that have great bike infrastructure. So if you look at places like Mission Hill or Jamaica Plain, places that have access to something like the Southwest Corridor, you actually see a much higher percentage of people who are biking. So across all of those modes, whether you're walking or you're biking, you're taking transit or you're driving, we're trying to figure out ways to make that experience simply better for you, and in particular, help shift people towards things that generate less congestion, cost less, and generate less emissions.
I'm noticing more bike lanes too.
That's right. So we have a big focus, particularly on some key corridors like Mass Ave,
Yes.
As well as in some key intersections like Park Drive and Beacon Street in the Fenway, to put in not just bike lanes, but actually bike lanes that are protected either by a raised curb or by parked cars, which create a safer experience for everybody who's on the road. So we recently completed some new parking protected bike lanes in that Audubon Circle area in the Fenway, or adjacent to the Fenway. We just have been wrapping up a big project that goes through the north end and into the west end called Connect Historic Boston, which has a high quality cycle track that goes through that area that allows folks to more comfortably be able to ride in that corridor. And there's a set of things that we're doing as well, not just to improve the bike infrastructure, but to make bikes more accessible. So we are...
Residents also participated in where these bikes are placed, correct? We're going to have some more...
Exactly right. So the mayor recently announced that we are actually increasing what's called Hubway, which is the city's bike share system, by about 50% over the next 2 years. And exactly as you said, we have residents right now who are attending community meetings who are helping tell us where is it that we should be putting our next Hubway bike share station so that they can have access to a bike that they can easily sort of check in and check out at their convenience. That's a very important program for us, and as we think about where we want to expand Hubway, we have a particular focus on areas of the city which, again, are either more transit dependent or have less access to vehicles. So places like the Fairmount Corridor that goes through Dorchester and Mattapan and Hyde Park.
Yes. You mentioned being thoughtful or mindful of climate change. And the accessibility of using bikes will actually lessen and help improve that. So as we move into that, what about other transportation as far as reliability and lessening gas emissions? Can you talk to us about the MBTA?
Yep. So about a quarter of all of the emissions that happen in Boston actually come from the transportation sector.
Okay.
So things that we can do, exactly to your point, that encourage more walking or biking or public transit are things that we can do that also will lower emissions in the city of Boston. So we have a great partnership with MassDOT and with the MBTA, and have been working with them on a variety of things that are going to help more people be able to access things like buses or trains in our city. So just as a few examples, every day the MBTA puts out on a online dashboard called MBTA Back on Track the reliability scores for all the major lines in the buses. Buses tend to be less reliable than all of the major subway lines and light rail lines and commuter rail lines in the city.
Why is that?
So a lot of that has to do with things that together the MBTA and the city can actually improve. So if we can improve signal timing at our traffic signals, if we can think about places we can put in a dedicated bus lane as we have currently between Dudley Square and downtown Boston on the Silver Line, if we can think about more places that may need that, we can put that in. We'll actually be in a position where we can actually improve the reliability of buses, improve people's interest in actually riding them, and consequently be able to shift some folks out of cars and onto buses and improve the overall mobility of our city. There's also things which the T has been doing that are part of the Go Boston 2030 plan that we're very appreciative of. One of those is to actually extend the hours that MBTA buses run. So there's a large number of people who commute.
We've been working on this for years.
We have, and so recently the MBTA approved something called the Sunrise Service, which essentially will be starting a set of key buses an hour earlier. So starting rather than at 5:30 at 4:30 or whatever the sort of the appropriate hour is. They're just catching more of those individuals who are either commuting home late at night or going to work for an early morning shift. A huge number of residents in our city and across the region work in industries like our healthcare industries, like our food services industries, logistics, constructions, transportation, that really rely on getting around the city when many of us are asleep. And so we've been working with the MBTA to improve the frequency of bus service during those hours. And the next piece of that is really to think about what happens between the hours essentially of 1 a.m. and around 4 a.m. Are there bus routes that we should be really focused on to help more people get around during those hours as well?
And I heard they're also implementing or having buses or some kind of MBTA transportation within 10 minutes.
Yes. So one of the key goals that we heard from our residents was make sure that every house within the city of Boston is within a 10-minute walk of a key bus route, which is one of the major bus routes of the MBTA, or a subway line. Make it within a 10-minute walk of a car share station. Make it within a 10-minute walk of a bike share station. And then if we can do that, we're actually giving better choice to all of our neighborhoods. So our goal is that by 2030 we'll be there. Everybody will be within a 10-minute walk of those three things. Right now, about 42% of all of our residents are actually within a 10-minute walk of those three things. So we've got a ways to go over the next several years. We've started the process, though, of actually expanding good opportunities to those services, both through the hubway expansion that we've got going on over the next 2 years and through a program called Drive Boston. So with Drive Boston, we're actually allowing car share providers to actually have a vehicle that people can essentially check out for periods of time that are located either on street or in municipal lots, which give people just simply another choice to be able to get around the city.
Let's talk about equity and economic opportunity. There's so many things that you're working on, the city in general is working on. What jobs can we expect, lasting jobs?
Right, so a big part of what we're seeing in the city of Boston is that there's immense amount of growth in areas that are slightly outside of the hub and spoke transit system that we have today. If you live on a major rail line and you work downtown, you're actually fairly well served by transit.
Yes.
But if you don't live on a major rail line and you're commuting to a job that is off of sort of the hub and spoke network that we have, there's work that we need to do to actually form some new connections to get you to where your final destination is and really actually help you be able to actually conveniently apply for and get any of these jobs in these new growth areas. So there's places like the South Boston waterfront today, there's places like the Longwood Medical area. In the future there are places like Beacon Yards in Alston, all of which we're really focused on as places that we need to be able to bring more and better sort of transit and mobility services to. So we've got an ongoing process with our partners at the state. And in places like the South Boston waterfront, people will be seeing over the next year or so some improved ways in which they're going to be able to get around. So there's going to be some more number 7 and number 9 buses, which are the key buses that run through that area. Some improvements to Silver Line service, a new service that's going to get folks by ferry from North Station to the South Boston waterfront, and we'll be looking to rebuild some of the streets in that area to actually make them better for cyclists. So there's a whole set of things that are really about ensuring that all of our residents in our city have great access to these new job centers that are growing. On the equity side, we are particularly focused on those places that we have high numbers of residents with really long commutes today. So in the city of Boston, what we see is that many, at least in sort of a small group of our neighborhoods, we've got a high percentage of people who are paying a significant share of wallet, a significant amount of their income on transportation. And in one neighborhood of our city, neighborhood of Mattapan, we've got about a quarter of the residents who have a one-way commute that is about an hour. A one-way commute to their job, which is about an hour, which really means that it puts a great strain on just their the day-to-day, and it makes some jobs perhaps less accessible, or ones that they would be less interested in applying for, and consequently, the city as a whole is losing out. So for us, we're really focused on what are the things that we can do for those communities that are spending a higher share of wallet on transportation and that have worse commutes today to be able to get to these job centers that either exist or they're going to be built out in the future. So for us in Go Boston 2030, that means really pushing on things like higher frequency on the Fairmount line, which is a commuter rail line that goes essentially from Hyde Park to South Station through Mattapan and through Dorchester, and improving things like bus service from places like Mattapan Square up to the Longwood Medical area. These are some of the key initiatives that we're focused on over the next couple of years.
Excellent. Boston Public Works, what's happening over there?
So the Public Works team is a fantastic team. They literally 24/7, 365 are on our streets, making our streets smoother, safer, better for all of our residents. In the winter, that certainly does mean being out there, making sure that we're putting down salt in advance of any storms and plowing snow when it comes. And it also means figuring out the right way to collaborate with our residents, and we're so appreciative of residents who do their part to shovel out the sidewalk after a storm and really sometimes go that extra yard, literally, to actually shovel out a neighbor who may be a neighbor who is unable to do it for themselves. For anybody in the city who wants to make sure that their their block is clean, that they see a pothole, that they see graffiti, they see a street light that is out, they see litter on their block, I highly encourage them to either call 311 or use our 311 mobile app. It's the best way to connect with our public works team, and we pride ourselves on being able to respond to each of those requests as they come in.
Excellent. And recycling too,
Yes.
right? You have a recycling program.
We do.
That
So
they can...
absolutely. So our team also ensures that everybody's trash and recycling and yard waste gets picked up every single week. And as part of that, over the course of this next calendar year, the mayor has kicked off something called Zero Waste Boston. And through that effort, we're actually going to be doing a set of planning efforts to figure out what are the specific things that we can do that can actually reduce the amount of trash that we're generating, whether it's in businesses or in our homes, and be able to increase our recycling in our city. It is critical for our economy. It's critical for our environment.
Yeah.
And we're really excited about the year ahead and looking forward to engaging residents and figuring out how we can do a better job
Well,
of this.
hopefully that works out, because that's going to be huge in years to come. You were the chair of the Public Improvement Commission. What's that about?
Sure.
Tell us.
Sure. The Public Improvement Commission is a commission within the city that is comprised of several different departments, the Water and Sewer Department, the Transportation Department, the Public Works Department, the Inspectional Services Department, and the Property Management Department. And that team basically looks at the public right-of-way, all of the streets and sidewalks in the city, and really it ensures that the physical changes to that right-of-way actually work for everybody who is for all the users of the street. And that means where a sidewalk is and where street trees go in, but it also means what happens below the asphalt, below the surface. So we work with utility companies to make sure that they are putting in infrastructure that is safe and appropriate in our roads. And I encourage anybody who has got an interest to tune in to watch a PIC hearing. They happen typically every other Thursday at 10 a.m. And you can hear
right here on Boston City TV.
Right here on Boston City
live,
TV, exactly.
or on Boston.gov.
Exactly, either way. And folks can get a sense of all the things that are going to be happening coming up, either sort of above the asphalt or below.
And this is all to promote what you're doing, along with the mayor and the vision of making Boston more transparent.
Yes.
So it's excellent,
Yep,
excellent.
yeah.
So we should be seeing some improvements on the streets, the
Absolutely.
MBTA, parking meters. We can pay from wherever we are.
Exactly.
So it's excellent. A lot of things that were covered that, is very interesting for people, for me. So thank you. I really appreciate you being here.
It's my pleasure to be here. I would say that the people who really deserve the thanks are the team I get to work with every single day. I have a really fantastic group that I get to work with, knowledgeable, passionate, dedicated public servants who are literally 24/7 doing things to help move people safely in our city, make sure our streets are clean, make sure our streets are vibrant, and I'm very fortunate to be able to work for this mayor and with this team to do all this work.
That's great for you to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Najya.
Come back, please.
Anytime.
Okay, thank you. If you are interested in learning more about what we discussed, please visit boston.gov/publicworks. You can also get the latest updates on Twitter at BostonBTD or at BostonPWD. And remember, Boston PIC public hearings are aired every Thursday at 10 a.m. on Boston City TV. You can also watch them online at boston.gov/cable. Thank you for watching Commissioner's Corner. I'm Najya Mawasi.